Okay. There's an image I have floating around in my head, and it's always attracted me. I think it's one of those things that, as a human being, when you see it, you immediately recognize it. You even attribute, unique powers to it, in a sense. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the pyramid. The pyramid. We always think of a pyramid as being four-sided, don't we? I mean, because we always see them sitting on the ground. But I want you to imagine the Great Pyramid at Giza floating in the air. And it's no longer four-sided. It's five-sided. And I don't want to suggest that consciousness crystals in that sense are geometrically perfect little pyramids. They're not. However, they're five-sided. And they are five-sided in the same way because they have to be. Because they have to be. Let's think about it for a moment. We were looking at our structure last week, and we were looking at the box, the four, and we were looking at this construct of the four. And that we saw that in the moment that the four is established, that the five, the subjective space, the illusion, if you will, emerges. But as you can see in this illustration, where each of the primary corners that establish the parameters of existence, that they each have their side, they each have their facet face. Yet the moment that we put this object in the air, so to speak, and at the bottom of this is this, then we see the way in which this becomes the integrative field of the others. They may have their relationships to each other, going around, going across, whatever the case may be. But the fact is that it is the bottom. Let's call it the bottom. It is the bottom that has a continuity of consistency with all of them. This is the theme of space. So when you're thinking about the crystals of consciousness, the first thing we have to think about is that we are going to have four faces, and we're going to have a bottom. I'm going to stay with bottom for a while. Now let's think. We've got four faces. Why is it that they cannot be like the Pyramid of Giza? If they were the Pyramid of Giza and everything was exact in terms of its mathematics, then the frequency of a neutrino going in here, or the frequency here, or the frequency here, or the frequency there, wherever it may go in, would be the same. And then we wouldn't have existence. You see, what's so interesting for me about the nature of the crystals of consciousness is that they each have a unique face. They're not the same. They cannot be the same. Not only can they not be the same, but every crystal that broke off from the original crystal in the shattering, that each of them share in the fractal of that, they each share these four different qualities of face. Now that's very important for us. Why is it important? I'm asking all these rhetorical questions this morning. I must have Socrates sitting in my brain. It's all about frequency after all. I'm very interested in figuring out what the ratio is, that is the difference between each of these. The difference is dictating the change in the frequency. And the change of the frequency brings a specific quality. It's like, think about it from this point of view. You have a neutrino. That neutrino, wherever it's coming from, whatever phase it's going to go through, that neutrino is, how can I put this? It is just a programming agency, a data stream. But that data stream has many possible ways in which it can be filtered. Now, of course, that data stream releases its data as a frequency. And it is the frequency, within the frequency, that the specific quality is established. It's like, it's like a string on a guitar. The string has a basic quality to it, a basic frequency to it. This is the neutrino. But the moment that you place your finger somewhere, you change the frequency. And in changing the frequency, you change the information that you're putting out. And you see, these frequencies are, they're so profound. I mean, we're not talking about a note on a guitar. We're talking about all of existence. And you see, these four elements become everything. And that crystal needs to have four different faces. And not only does this crystal need to have four different faces, but all crystals need to have the same ratio relationship between the faces. Now, ratio doesn't mean size, if you know what I mean. In other words, there are going to be variations and themes, because otherwise we don't get the diversity. And again, remember that even looking at these four themes, we are looking at generalized, vast root or source data, and all of that is going to be integrated into a holistic whole that's going to take on another meaning, another value. It's going to quantumize. So we have crystals of consciousness in which it is clear that we have four faces, and that the faces must have a different ratio, and that not only that, but because they are binaries, they have to have recognizable mathematical differences that both bind them to each other as a binary and separate them as ratios from the other. I mean, I don't mean to confuse you with all kinds of mathematics, but there's no way of avoiding that. In other words, what we're looking at is the need of a physicist to write a formula. Now, we're going to write it our own way. I'll worry about the physics side and the allies I can find in that work. Because you see, to understand this, and let me get mystical for a moment, because it's always fun. We've always looked for the secret of life. I mean, we've always looked for the secret. We've always looked for power in that secret. The assumption that knowing the secret to life can be used as a tool to change life. You know, the old not-self magic. See, we all carry a base that's eternal. Our personality base. It's eternal. I mean, you've been carrying the same, as a incarnated force. Same personality crystal. Life after life. Same base. It permeates your whole being. It always has. And you see here, we are getting to the source of what it is. And at that very source is indeed a power. It is the power to tap into what is your uniqueness. Because the ultimate uniqueness of the personality, the ultimate uniqueness, is beyond the body. That's where tone is. We're on the outside of this crystal. We're not on the inside. We're not in the domain of the tone, where the frequencies are manipulated through the infrastructure of that particular crystal, which brings the uniqueness, creates the cognitive flesh and blood potential of human. No, you see, when you go to the base, you go to a transcendent place. I mean, like Elfrida's humor, We go to the place of God within us. I mean, we go to that place where we carry one of the primary instruments of existence. It's very profound in that way. And of course, the fact is that wherever you look in a body graph, you see nothing but bases, because that's what every calculation is. And ultimately, given I live long enough, there is a way, truly a way, to, see the deepest archetype of what we are. That is the transcendent personality, separate from the body. In my work, for example, in rave psychology, I teach the relationship of the crystal to the body, because obviously it is our concern. To understand how to operate through the design crystal intelligence, to understand how to deal with the byproduct of the personality crystal and the dilemmas of the passenger, all within the body, all within the monopole's illusion. But if you think about your personality crystal and you truly understand how to bring together the formula of all the bases in the chart, what you're actually seeing is your transcendent spirit. Truly, it's quite something. I mean, your transcendent spirit. The personality, in essence, before it is personality, before it is a tool of the monopole for body. We're right at the source here. We're like the physicists that are examining the Big Bang. We're right at the roots of existence. And it's all made possible by the beauty of the filtration system. I mean, that's what these crystals are, after all. Every crystal unique, every one different, and yet following mathematical laws of the fractal. See, I talk a lot about fractals. And I don't necessarily know whether all of my students grasp that. I think a lot of them think of it in terms of the traditions of Eastern karma, that there are forces that you're going to meet and so forth and so on. I do not think of it in those terms, though I understand the associations. If you go back to the construct that I was given, that is a primary design crystal, a primary personality crystal, and they, in fact, the yang smashes into the yin, but nonetheless, however you want to look at that, they interact, and in their interacting is a shattering, what we call the explosion that we've given the name the Big Bang. Now think about the shattering. I mean, that is the thing that is the most important to grasp. It is one of my fantasies to create an animated film that would actually show the crystal shattering so that you could really see what is meant by a fractal. Unfortunately, it's still prohibitive to do these kind of things. See, when the crystal shatters, think about all the aspects. They all once fit together into that whole, which means that there are aspects that they were once connected to. You know, if you look at the 5 faces of the crystal, and you think about it before the Big Bang, those 5 faces were in fact connected to other faces. You know, it was all one. And it broke or shattered along fractal lines. So what you have is qualities of crystals, many different qualities, what I taught in the band too. And all of those qualities rooted on the fractal line out from the center. Every single, each, I should say, of the shattered primary crystals, they each had a center. And basically to understand the center is that if you could take the original primary design crystal and you could put a light through it, and you could take an image of the pattern that appears. Then if you took every single one of the crystals that were part of the shattering, and we're talking about numbers that are unimaginable to even try to imagine, to be able to imagine, to count. And you put the same light through all of them, they would all be different, except for one. Except for one. That's called the center. And it isn't in the physical center of the crystal. This is what creates specific fractal lines and depths of fractal geometry. In other words, if you could imagine that the center was like here, the fractal lines going in this direction of shattering are much longer and will involve many, many more aspects than the fractal line here. And so forth, going all the way out in the way in which the shattering takes place. My assumption is that if you were going through the center, what you would find is that there was 5 basic, fracture lines. And of course you end up with all of the different fractal possibilities that go out of it. The other thing is that as you move along that fractal going out, think just in simple terms. Let's say that on this fractal line, instead of talking about billions, let's say that there's 5 crystals. There are 5 personality crystals. And there are 5 personality crystals that are all on the same fractal line. Now imagine 15 billion years later that this one is in Joe and this one is in Harry. Well, I guarantee you that Harry and Joe have a connection to each other. They have a fractal connection to each other. And of course, these fractal connections don't come with the equipment of karma. In other words, everyone that you meet in your life, everyone that you meet in your life is on your fractal. These lines, they don't have 5, eh? Millions and millions and millions and millions. And of course what we'll get to see is that only certain fractals are human. Not all the fractal lines going out of the center are about human design crystals. They're not. I mean, there are so many, there's it's the source. Right? So what we're interested in is, what is the difference to begin with between these faces and ultimately the bottom? What is the difference? How have we translated, or at least the voice, translated this frequency into a language? First of all, it is translated into more than a language. One of the aspects of my encounter were visual elements. For example, I never heard the word rave. I saw it written. It was actually, when I say I saw it written, I don't mean I saw it written on a piece of paper. But I don't want to get into weird stuff. But anyway, I saw it written in the same way that the G Center, I saw it written. These symbols that you see, these symbols, along with juxtaposition, because it is a symbol that you don't get to see here, but of course is a very important symbol. That is, the juxtaposed symbol with the two triangles on top of each other, and the top being black and the bottom being white. A basic, a very, very stringent this and that. These 6 symbols together are a translation of the essential frequencies for all of existence, which I enjoy being able to say, because it's such a thing to say. I mean, these are the symbols. If there's ever going to be a mathematical formula of the way in which it works, these symbols are the formula in the terms of the language of the formula to describe this or that, whatever. It is more than that. They are, in fact, everything. They are language. They are. They translate into the universal glyphs of everything of the written domain. Every symbol, every glyph that's ever been created by humanity is rooted in these 6 symbols. I mean, that's their root. And so they are, they are an essential formula. And what we're going to look at is, what language can we give to these symbols? How can we begin to put together, the story of what these faces, what these facets, what they're really about? This theme, orientation and the positioners. I mean, this is the first thing that you really have to come to grips with in trying to understand bass, is to see that it's not personal. It is so not personal. It's all about setting the framework or the stage upon which an illusion can emerge. The facet sets the stage for the potential of the tone to do its work. And of course we see in tone that this is the cognitive architecture, the interior of the crystal, literally the architecture, the physical architecture of the interior of the crystal is what tone is. Because, of course, that physical interior architecture is going to interfere with the neutrino frequency as it moves through. That is, it's going to change the frequency. It's going to alter it according to the architecture. It is that architecture that builds the foundation of the personal life. That's why we can read a design down to the tone. It doesn't do you any good to read a design according to bass, because it isn't about building a unique individual life. It isn't. It is about establishing the ingredients out of which that can be built. It sets the foundation. It sets the orientation. Very important word in understanding base. It orients everything. In other words, the positioners. Putting everything in its right position, orienting everything in order to establish the framework or the stage upon which existence can be built. This is the hand of God. You lay the stage and you say, go forth and multiply, have fun, be cognitive, make babies. It sets the whole stage. We are, we're the byproduct of a carefully established charade. The ultimate illusion. Brought to you by the subjective. The whole stage is set. And when you think about it, because this is the thing that I find so fascinating about the way the program works. See, the program doesn't work on us. It works through everything. Because it is everything. We cannot separate some abstract base from the fact that in reality, the world is teeming with them. Teeming with them. And it is all of those facets, all of the 5 bases, alive in the world, in all things. Animate, inanimate, you name it. That is maintaining the stage upon which the life is all built. We carry this incredible responsibility if you wake up. The responsibility is to be as cleanly and as purely yourself as you can. To live out the possibility of uniqueness. It's what we're here for. And we cannot escape the stage itself. And we have to accept something about the stage. Is that we are limited in what the stage is really for us. This is one of the things to see about spending 30, 40, 50, 60 lives carrying the same position, same orientation, same setup, different possibilities, after all. The personality, which is the only eternal aspect of our nature, is totally dependent on whatever the design crystal of that particular life is going to be. There are so many possibilities. And yet we have this transcendent theme that we, as unique beings, can offer to the whole. See, when somebody dies, we lose 5 pillars of existence, if you know what I mean. One of them, anyway. This is what makes our Maya so dense today, the human Maya. There's over 7 billion of us. There's 7 billion of us with, 70 trillion base aspects. all works through us. It's why that no one on the outside, no Messiah, no prophet, no guru, no master, can change the world. You can only change your own life. You can only wake up yourself. And in doing so, then you really demonstrate ultimately the full power of that uniqueness. Because you get to tap into this, transcendent source. Okay, so let me get out of my mystical rut here, and let's get down to business. Okay, let's start at the beginning. It's always good to start at the beginning. Let's talk about number one, the ReACTive, and the theme of movement. I love this symbol. It's one of my favorites. And of course, you notice that it is the, what would you call that? The obverse? I don't know how you would call that, but it is, these are the two same elements, but they're stacked differently. In juxtaposition, you can see the way in which they are stacked, clearly. But here, in movement, we have something different. I mean, when you look at this symbol, there is a sense of, turn it upside down and you've got yourself an hourglass, and things moving through. It is a yin-yang, the inverse, thank you. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it is the inverse. I don't know. We'll get to it, Jagrudi. There is an expression for that. This movement, think about the term that we're looking at. We're looking at a combination of movement and individuality. Movement and individuality. I'll say it again. I'm talking physics. Movement and individuality. No two objects can occupy the same place at the same time. It's just a basic law of physics on the surface. No two objects. The second great law of the universe is that everything is moving. Always has. Existence is inseparable from movement. Here we have uniqueness. It isn't about individuality as we think about it. Individuality in the sense of, the individual in design and so forth and so on. It is about establishing a physical law. When I say that no two objects can occupy the same place at the same time, it's because we have a world in which one of the filters is the first base. I mean, if we had a world where, 3, 4, 5, 6 objects could occupy the same place at the same time, we would not have a life in which you and I were separate from each other. It would not exist. We would have a different illusion. We would be muddle people or puddle people or whatever, I don't know. See, these are the forces of life moving through us. And it's not anymore thinking about it in psychological terms. I mean, after all, we live in a dense neutrino ocean. Dense neutrino ocean. I mean, it's so dense, it's beyond imagination. I mean, if you had the eyes to see, you would see nothing because it's so dense. Dense ocean. And it's all moving at near the speed of light, 3 trillion neutrinos a second through every little space. And all those base crystals filtering the ocean. And here we are in our illusion. And as it filters the ocean through the first base, it maintains the law of separateness. It maintains the law of no two objects can occupy the same place at the same time. And you can see here that this is the root upon which, when this frequency, goes ramming through here and goes into the tonal architecture, you can see the roots of the development of the unique being. And I've taught juxtaposition theory 3 times now in my career. And each time I tried to teach it from a philosophical perspective rather than from a pure physical perspective. And I think at this stage of the knowledge, I think that because people have been examining color and tone with me, that we can get away from the psychological, analytical approach and simply look at the physical and understand that, it is the basis that establish the form principle. The form principle, you can see it already in the first base. You can see the establishment of the unique form, the root of the form principle. To create ultimately these forms by which the experiment of cognition can be lived out. And yet at this point, when we're talking about the base separate from tone and just seeing it in isolation, and we look at the first base, we are simply looking at a fundamental law, the law of our illusion, the law of the form principle in our illusion, that all things will be separate. That's the law. And you can see the separation. And this is not a juxtaposition separation in which there is a broad area, the bottoms meeting in that sense, a broad area in which these forces can meet and the quantum can take place. You see this very, very finite little point in here. What do you think this is about? See, not only does the first base bring us the unique form principle, it brings us a unique binary form principle. Binary. In a sense, it is the root of what ultimately we could call sex, or the need for it, or gender and its creation. See, these are physical principles going into the world, maintaining the world, and they move through us. See, my great concern about human beings understanding the nature of the magnetic monopole is to understand that we are all of us on this planet, that our lives are all based on the quality of the frequency of our vehicle. The monopole in its attraction frequency attracts the colors of design and personality, brings together the illusion of the separateness, creates a frequency. But the frequency exists in a Maya illusion. And it means that the frequency is subject to change within the illusion itself, separate from whatever the monopole can control. The monopole is only bringing in frequency. However, the way it brings in frequency can be distorted the moment that the vehicle isn't operating with the correct frequency. The moment that you're operating according to strategy and authority, you align your vehicle to what is its correct frequency, which means the magnetic monopole can begin to attract what is correct in terms of what it needs to bring together in the illusion. But it also means that it creates a line going down a chain. And it means that the moment in that correctness that you open up that programming link, you go down from the color all the way down in that sense to the base. In other words, the pure quality of the way in which form is intended to exist on this planet is distorted. And of course we know that. For example, we know that by the very fact that the separated vehicles tend to be deeply vulnerable. There's all kinds of distortion because of the fact that the frequency of humanity is incorrect. We're all responsible for the quality of the totality. It's not imposed on us. It's not like there's a God up there saying, there shall be, It's us. We're filtering. We are the illusion makers. We are creating, maintaining the illusion all the time. It operates through our vehicles. It operates through our crystals. And I'm not just talking about your personality crystal and your design crystal. Those are prime crystals in you. Think about the billions of cells that you have in your body. Each one has a design crystal with a base and a monopole. The level at which we maintain, it's us. It's why there's no, great cure from outside. It's such a joke. There is no outside. The outside is just a byproduct of us. You have to change us, one by one. One by one. The ReACTive. Now you're really getting something. The ReACTive. This is perhaps the greatest of truths that can be revealed in base. Is the truth about the nature of being and the lie that we have choice. We don't. These forms, these separated forms are built to react in movement. React in movement, not act in movement. React in movement. It doesn't matter what type you are. I'm a manifester. The truth is, like all things, we all react. That the moment that you're aware, it's so obvious that we do not do. The doing truly gets done. So here you see the bedrock. Whenever you're looking at a one, you're looking at something that is a basis of things, a foundation of things. Here is the first foundation in the life program. This is the first orientation. This orientation to, be separate, and to be separate in movement, and to be a binary separation in movement, reacting. Programmed. And everyone who carries that first base and every crystal that operates through the first base, this is what it is putting out. Like zillions of projectionists, in which, as a bystander, you only see the illusion of life. Physical programming. Physical. We cannot escape it. We can't. It's right there at the very foundation of the way in which we are programmed and the way in which the whole cosmos is held together. I'm an exponent of 9-dimensional juxtaposition theory. That is the relativistic 4-dimensional illusion of light that we live in, and its underlying foundation, this 5-dimensional field, rooted in what is the basis, a way of understanding the underlying framework of everything, upon which lives out the relativistic process. Okay. If we move across, remember, we are going to see that ultimately in the formula that's established, that there is a specific quality of relationship between these two, though different, that binds them to the fact that they are polarities in the structure of the crystal itself. We're going to be able to say the same thing, by the way, or I'm going to say the same thing about the 3 and the 4. And again, you'll notice that it's not like you see that evidence, the evidence of that just simply visually. You do not. But here we come to perhaps one of the most fascinating areas that we're going to be able to look at in our work in base theory. That is evolution. And evolution and mind. Do you recognize the symbol for the 2? If you go back to our class of last week and we were looking at the formula of pre-singularity, we had this double E with these PowerPoints on it. And this double E representing an extraordinary amount of just pure energy. We could call this the true Yang principle, as different from the one, which is the pure Yin principle. In other words, what binds them is their difference. Now, one of the things to understand, because of course we're looking at a totality, is that I'm doing the 1-2 because I want to show you their difference. But the fact is that the relationships are quite different from what we would expect. In other words, we saw this in the drawing from last week. I don't have it in this graphing, so you can go back and reference it yourself. But you'll see, for example, that there's a special relationship, for example, between the 1-4. They have this relationship with each other, this shared boundary, if you will. And there is a special relationship between these 2. And of course, here is where the brain's going to be built. So again, I want you to grasp that the actual affinities here are the 2 with the 3 and the 1 with the 4. There is not a natural affinity between the 1 and the 2, and yet in the frequencies, we're going to see that they have a bond to each other that is different than the bond that the 3 and the 4 have to each other. I mean, that will be very important anyway, get into all of that. I don't have enough time. Okay, so the mind. This term evolution. Everything about the second base is to orient us towards the future. It's the way it works. But it's something else as well. That is, it's one of the things that haunt us in life. I guess it's the thing that in many ways, haunts us the most. It's death. It's death. See, the second base says, we can only get to where we're going to by going through many, 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 many variations. Many, 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 many variations. And that means that variations are going to come and go. That this is not an eternal program. About creating the form that's going to last forever and mature through its great long process. No. This is about rapid turnover. This is the wheel turning. And it is only through this death and rebirth and death and rebirth and death and rebirth that mind can grow. And what we will get to see is that, in essence, the second base has nothing to do with mind in the way we understand it, because again, I don't want to associate it philosophically or analytically to see what this simply means as a physical thing. The physical programming is short-term existence. All comes from the second base. Short-term existence. This is the foundation of the development, ultimately what will be the development of mind. Of mind. It's quite something to think about. You know? I mean, it's not necessarily what one would expect when you talk about what is the source of mind. The source of mind is death or terminality. Yeah. This image it is deeply, deeply dualistic. And here is the first place where you can see associations in terms of the oppositions. Again, oppositions in this sense. That is, it is clear that individuality is a binary. You know, you can see the binary parts of it. And you can also see that mind is a binary, not just a binary, but a distorted mirror, because the points are not exactly the same in them. You have a double point here and a single point here. What you're looking at here, and again, you have this binary, sorry for my drawing here, but you've got this binary split in the middle, and in having that binary split going down the middle, you have the two sides of mind. And of course, again, this is, it's the establishment of the dynamics necessary for illusion. You cannot operate illusion without the yin-yang, the this and that. This is juxtaposition theory. And the moment that you have this potential of this and that, everything else can get filled in. In other words, all the other possibilities are there. One of the most interesting things about the roots of mind is that mind is not a singularity. I mean, it isn't. It's not a singularity in the way in which body and ego are. They don't have obvious displays of duality. Not at all, in fact. Though you could suggest that these wings here on either side of this symbol are binary, but we'll see that in another context. There is a relationship, again, between these two, and that relationship, again, here you're going to see the binary quality is a very important theme. We are, a binary form type with a binary mental process. That binary mental process, when you're looking at the second base, you're looking at the root of left mind, right mind. You're looking at, all of these ways in which, the mind is impacted. And again, the fact of how difficult it is for mind ever to come to a single point. Because even in the most steadfast mind with a single point of view, the fact is that all the other views are still there. You never get rid of them. The devil's argument is always in the corner. So here in the first two bases, we see the establishment of two separate binary tracks. Now again, we are not fully going to see mind until we see it in its relationship to body, nor will we fully see the form potential of individuality until we see it in relationship to the ego. And then only then can the glue that holds it all together emerge. The construct of personality, which, as long as you have a really good sense of humor, you're going to find hilarious, because there's nothing there. But that's another story. How fantastic it is in each of us, these crystals, these bases. There's something else before I close for today. The entry and exits. Because I'm sure that many of you, ponder this. And there was somebody who asked me a question about, if it's going in, it must come out through a base. In other words, it goes in through a base, there must be an exit base. But in fact, that's not true. They go out through edges, points. In other words, something that is going in here, the chances are it's going to come out on one of these point lines between things. In other words, it's just very important to understand that. I mean, it is for me, because, of course, understanding the geometries necessary are going to help me be able to understand what the ratios have to be for the crystals. But the fact is that as the neutrino is going through, it does not go out a base in the pure sense. It doesn't. It's like, when you have a drum. If you hit the drum in the center, there's quite a frequency that goes out. But if you hit the drum right where its skin is rolled over the edge of the drum, there is no frequency. This is the place where the frequency is released from the tone underneath as the neutrino exits. And, there are exit points that exist within the crystal itself. I've been investigating online three-dimensional geometric software. Jeez, I tell you, that's quite a thing. I may have to go back to school or get really good allies who can grasp all of this. But that formula, see, I think it's the most, I think it's the formula for life. That is, if you can write a formula in which you can say that, one's relationship to two, relative to three's relationship to four equals 5, and how all of that, the configuration of that, you've got a formula that can be translated into anything. Into anything. But yeah, I'll leave that with you to ponder. I do enjoy my Friday mornings of physics and magic, and I'm glad you get in here. It's I know that for a lot of you it's an odd hour, but anyway, you do take care, and we'll get this up for you today so you can download these illustrations and have something to ponder. And we'll continue with our journey, by the way, with this look at orientation and positioners next week. Okay, so you have a good one. Till next week. Bye for now.